They say the hardest goodbye is the one you never planned for. The kind that doesn't come with tears or a funeral or even a suitcase by the door. It's the goodbye that comes in a single sentence. And for me, that sentence was, "Grandma, I'm grown. I don't owe you an explanation." That's all it took. 17 years of love, care, and sacrifice snapped in half with one phone call. I remember the click of that hang-up more clearly than any lullaby I ever sang to her. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was final. That small, cold click was the sound of a cord being cut. Not the phone cord, but the invisible one that had tied my heart to hers since the day she was born. When I first held her, she was barely 6 pounds. Her mama was still a girl herself, lost in her own storm, and I stepped up like grandmothers do. I became the constant. The provider. The protector, I told myself. If she has me, she'll never have to feel unwanted. I paid her first doctor's bill, bought her first winter coat, made sure she had her own bed when all I had was a couch to sleep on, and when she turned 12 and wanted a phone, like everyone else, I got her one. A small flip phone at first, then an iPhone, then another, and another. Because every time she dropped it or lost it, I told myself, she's just growing up. It's normal. What wasn't normal was how much I gave, and how little I asked for in return. Over the years, my wallet became her safety net when she wanted to join cheerleading but couldn't afford the uniform Grandma paid. When she wanted to go on senior trip, Grandma paid. When college tuition came due and her mama was nowhere to be found, Grandma dipped into her savings. And when she got her first apartment but couldn't keep the lights on, guess who the electric company saw coming? That's right, me. You'd think after all that, I'd at least earn the right to ask where she was going for the weekend. But apparently love comes with an expiration date once pride sets in. That morning she called to say she was heading out of town. Her voice was chipper, carefree. I asked gently, "Where you headed, baby?" And that's when the air changed. She sighed. One of those long, exaggerated sighs that says you're such a burden. Then came the words I'll never forget. "I'm grown, Grandma. I don't owe you an explanation." Before I could even process it, I heard that click. At first, I just stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. I thought maybe she'd call back. Maybe she'd realize how disrespectful that was. But the phone stayed silent. So I did what I've done all my life when someone hurts me. I went back to my chores. I washed dishes that didn't need washing. Folded laundry that was already folded. Anything to fill the silence that now sat in my kitchen like a ghost. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that call over and over. Not because of what she said, but because of what it meant. It meant she no longer saw me as family. She saw me as an obstacle, a nagging old woman trying to control her, and maybe I was guilty of caring too much. Maybe I did hover. But when you've raised a child from the moment she could walk, and suddenly she looks at you like a stranger, it feels like a part of your body is missing. I realized something in that moment. For 17 years, I had been financing her independence while slowly bankrupting my own peace of mind. I looked over at the stack of bills on my kitchen counter. Electric, water, gas, and that same old phone bill. Her number right there, under family plan. Every month I told myself it was just one small thing I could do to stay connected. Every ring was a reminder that she still needed me. But now, that phone was a leash I'd put around my own neck. And that night, sitting there under the yellow glow of my kitchen lamp, I said to myself out loud, "If she's grown, let her be grown all the way." I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just picked up the phone, called the carrier, and said the most liberating sentence of my life. "I'd like to remove a line from my account." The representative asked, "Are you sure, ma'am?" And I said, "I've never been more sure of anything." When that line disconnected, I felt something inside me reconnect. To myself. That was the night I stopped being the rescue boat for people who didn't even wave back. It was the night I realized that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is stop cushioning their fall. But at that point, I didn't yet know what real peace felt like, because cutting her off financially was only the first step. The real work, the emotional untangling was still ahead of me. And trust me, it's one thing to stop paying someone's bills. It's another to stop carrying their weight in your heart. You know, people always assume heartbreak comes fast, like lightning. But that's not how mine came. Mine came in small doses, drip by drip, favor by favor, bill by bill. A slow erosion of boundaries until one day I realized I'd become less of a grandmother and more of a background service. It didn't start with disrespect. No, disrespect rarely knocks at the front door. It slips in quietly through kindness. It started with a simple, "Grandma, can you help me out this month?" Just that. One little sentence that would repeat itself over and over, changing form but never tone. "Grandma, can you help me with rent?" "Grandma, I lost my job." "Grandma, I just need to borrow your card until payday." Payday always came, but the money never did. At first, I was proud of myself. I felt needed. There's a certain warmth in being someone's lifeline. You tell yourself it. Love when really, it's dependency dressed in affection. I remember when she got her first job at the boutique downtown. She came home with her first paycheck, grinning from ear to ear. I said, "Baby, I am so proud of you. You finally making your own money." She said, "Yeah, Grandma. Now I can take you out for lunch." I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. We went to that little cafe by the park and she insisted on paying. She ordered a salad and I got my usual, grilled chicken with mashed potatoes. When the bill came, her card declined. She laughed it off. But I slipped my card to the waiter so she wouldn't be embarrassed. She said, I'll get you next time." There was never a next time. Then there were birthdays. Oh, I loved birthdays. I'd spend weeks planning her parties when she was little, streamers, cupcakes, balloons. Every year had a theme. But somewhere along the way, the gifts became expectations. One year, I gave her a bracelet I'd saved up for, silver with her initials engraved. She smiled politely, then said, "It's cute. But you know I really wanted that smartwatch." I laughed it off. I always did because I thought love meant swallowing your disappointment quietly. When she went off to college, I thought maybe things would change. I dreamed of phone calls about her classes, her friends, her future. Instead, I got texts that started with, "Hey Grandma, can you send $50? Can you send a care package? Can you send a care package? Can you send me your Netflix password?" She never once asked how I was doing. But I still answered every message because I told myself that what good grandmothers do. The first real crack appeared one Christmas. I'd cooked for 2 days straight. Roast turkey, mac and cheese, yams, pies, the works. The house smelled like cinnamon and joy. She showed up late, head buried in her phone. Barely said hello. Halfway through dinner, she stood up and said, "Grandma, can I borrow your car for the night? My friends are having a party." I said, "Sweetheart, it's Christmas, Ken. You stay a while." She rolled her eyes and said, "I am grown, Grandma. I don't have to sit around all night." That was the first time she used that word on me, grown. It hit me harder than she knew. Because to me, grown always meant responsible. But to her, it meant untouchable. Still, I let her take the car. She came back the next morning. No apology, empty gas tank, and a half smile. I told myself, she's young. She'll learn. But she didn't. Every time I forgave her, I taught her she didn't need to change. A few years later, she lost her job. She cried on the phone, and my heart broke all over again. I offered to let her move in. At first, she was grateful. She'd say, "Grandma, I don't know what I'd do without you." But gratitude has a short shelf life. Within months, she'd taken over my living room with her laundry, used up my Wi-Fi for endless streaming, and treated my home like a hotel she didn't have to pay for. I'd come home from the grocery store with bags of food, and she'd grab the snacks before I could even put the milk away. I didn't mind. until I realized she never once asked if I needed help carrying the bags. One afternoon, I asked her to take out the trash, she said. "Can it wait? I am on FaceTime." And I stood there, holding the garbage bag, realizing that I was doing more housework at 72 than she was at 24. Then came the monthly phone bills. IDC her charges. Streaming subscriptions, online shopping, calls that ran up over $100. I didn't confront her. I just paid it, because love makes you silent in the wrong moments. But silence has a cost. And one day, that cost added up to everything I had left. My savings, my dignity, and my peace of mind. I still remember the night I sat down at my kitchen table with a notepad. I wrote down every expense I covered for her that year. Phone bill, $120 a month. Gas money, $60 a week. Groceries, too many to count. Rent, 3 months worth when she fell behind. And that's not even counting the emergencies that always seem to pop up at the worst times. When I finished the list, I just stared at the numbers. It wasn't just money I lost. It was respect, and the cruel part. I had volunteered for my own exhaustion. I looked at that list. And for the first time in my life, I saw myself not as the hero, but as the enabler. Every dollar I spent was another stitch in the net that kept her from standing on her own 2 feet. I had mistaken love for rescue, and she had mistaken rescue for entitlement. So when that final phone call came, the one where she said, "I'm grown, Grandma. I don't owe you an explanation," it wasn't just rude, it was prophetic, because she was right. She didn't owe me an explanation, not anymore, and I didn't owe her another dime. That was the moment I knew, the kind of love that doesn't have boundaries will always become a burden, but I wasn't ready to let go yet, not completely. Because before liberation comes, there's always that one last illusion you have to break. The hope that they'll realize your worth before it's too late. They say awakening doesn't come as thunder. It comes as quiet clarity, like the air after a storm. That's how mine arrived. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was one ordinary morning, one small moment that changed everything. I was in the kitchen, frying eggs just the way she liked over easy, with pepper and a slice of toast. Even after all the arguments, all the disrespect, I still made breakfast for her every morning before she left for work. That day, she came out of her room with her phone in her hand, scrolling, barely looking at me. I said, "Morning, baby," she said, "Hey," without lifting her eyes. I set her plate on the table, and before I could sit down, she said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I might not come home tonight. We're going to a concert out of town," just like that. No details, no explanation. I smiled gently and asked, "Who are you going with?" And she froze, rolled her eyes, then said those same 7 words that had burned into my heart like acid. "I'm grown, Grandma. I don't owe you an explanation." And before I could even speak, she turned and walked out the door. That door didn't just close, it echoed. It echoed through every sacrifice I'd made, every night I'd stayed up worrying, every dollar I'd spent trying to give her a better life. It was like the universe finally spoke back to me and said, "Enough." I sat down at that kitchen table, staring at her untouched breakfast, and for the first time in 17 years, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt clarity. Because in that moment, I realized I'd been trying to buy love that was never for sale. I looked around the kitchen, the phone bill on the counter, the grocery receipt in the trash, the pile of unopened mail that always had my name on it. But her fingerprints all over it, and I said out loud, "God, I've done my part. I've loved her with everything I had. If I keep going, I'll have nothing left, not for her, not for me." That's when I cried, not from hurt, but from release. Because for the first time, I wasn't crying for her, I was crying for me. That day, I didn't answer her texts. She messaged asking if I transferred her usual $150 for her weekend trip. I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I wrote the simplest message of my life. "Sweetheart, I think it's time you start handling your own bills. I believe in you." She left me on red. That silence. Oh. That silence was golden, because in that space I could finally hear myself. Later that evening, I sat in my recliner, sipping tea, and my favorite gospel song came on the radio. "I will trust in the Lord." I sang along quietly, and when the line came "till I die," I laughed softly and said to myself, "Not this time, Lord, not this time. I am going to live before I die." That's when it clicked. All these years I thought I was showing her unconditional love, but what I was really showing was unconditional access. And there's the difference. Love is steady, access is costly, and I was the one paying. The next morning I woke up early and made a decision. I grabbed my purse, walked to the phone store, and told the clerk I wanted to end one line from my account. She asked me the usual questions: account number, phone number, reason for cancellation. I said, "It's time to let someone grow." When she pressed the button and that line disconnected, I swear I could feel a weight lift off my shoulders. It was like exhaling for the first time in years. I walked out of that store lighter, freer. And as the sunlight hit my face, I whispered, "If she wants to be grown, she can pay for grown." Up things. For weeks after that, the silence was strange. No texts, no calls, no grandma. "Can you?" At first, I kept checking my phone out of habit. But every time the screen stayed blank, I smiled a little wider. Because I was finally learning what peace feels like when it doesn't come with conditions. I started cooking smaller meals. Just enough for one. I watched my shows without someone rolling their eyes. I even started walking in the park again, talking to old friends I hadn't seen in years. And the funny thing, the less I gave her, the more I got back from life. Then, one Sunday after church, my pastor said something that felt like it was written just for me. He said, "Sometimes God removes people not to punish them, but to protect you." That hit me right in my chest. Because that's exactly what it felt like. Not punishment. Protection. I went home that day, looked around my little house, and realized it finally felt like mine again. No tension, no chaos, just peace and quiet, and the sound of my own healing. But peace doesn't go unchallenged, because not long after that, the phone started ringing again, her number flashing across the screen. I didn't pick up the first time, or the second, or the third. But by the fourth call, something inside me said, "Answer, but don't bend." And that, right there, was the start of my multi-stage counterattack. Not revenge, not payback, but restoration. Because if she was grown enough to hang up on me, then she was grown enough to stand on her own 2 feet. And this time, I was going to let her. I used to think that exhaustion was just part of getting old. That the constant heaviness in my chest, the trembling in my hands, were just signs that time was catching up with me. But I was wrong. It wasn't age. It was the weight of living under their control. One evening, after another argument about the bills, I heard Amy say something that shattered me. She didn't know I was standing by the door. "I swear Mom's losing it," she told Greg. "If she keeps this up, we might as well get her declared incompetent. Then the house would automatically." She stopped mid-sentence, realizing what she had just said out loud. But Greg didn't stop her. He smirked. "Not a bad idea," he muttered. "She's been a wreck since your dad died. Wouldn't take much to prove she can't handle her own affairs." I remember gripping the doorknob, trying to keep my knees from buckling. For 13 years I had fed them, clothed their children, paid their debts, covered their medical bills, and even co-signed their car loans. And this was how they thanked me, by plotting to steal the roof over my head while I was still alive. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with the light off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet creaks of the house I built with my husband's hands. Every picture on the wall felt like a ghost. Reminders of better days, when Amy was small and full of laughter. When love still meant something. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. Not as a mother, but as a woman who had finally reached her limit. I called my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. He'd handled my husband's estate years ago and was one of the few people I still trusted. "May," he said after hearing everything, "you need to act before they do. If what you're saying is true, they could try to have you declared mentally unfit. We'll need to secure your assets immediately." "I don't want to destroy my daughter," I whispered. He sighed. "You're not destroying her, May. You're protecting yourself from the people who already are." For the first time in years, I felt clear. Like fog lifting after a long, endless storm, that same morning, Amy knocked on my bedroom door. "Mom, we need to talk," she said softly. Her voice was sweet, too sweet. I didn't open the door. "I'm busy," I told her. "Busy with what?" She snapped. "You've been acting paranoid lately. You're not thinking straight." I turned the lock, and for the first time she was the one left standing on the other side of the door. Mr. Harrison moved quickly. Within days we had begun the process of transferring the house into a living trust one that listed me as the sole trustee. It meant no one, not even Amy, could touch it without my explicit consent. Every document I signed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. My hand still trembled, but this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. For years I'd signed checks and forms that benefited everyone but me. Now, I was signing for my own freedom. Mr. Harrison arranged a quiet meeting with the bank to freeze joint accounts. Amy had convinced me to open for emergencies. It turned out those emergencies were mostly designer handbags, credit card debt, and 2 trips to Las Vegas. When Amy realized the accounts were frozen, she came storming into the kitchen, her face twisted in disbelief. "What did you do, Mom?" she yelled. "The card was declined at the grocery store. You embarrassed me." I looked her straight in the eyes. I stopped funding my own humiliation. Her jaw dropped. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm done paying for people who treat me like a burden." The calm in my voice startled her. For the first time in years, I wasn't pleading or apologizing or explaining. I was asserting. Greg walked in moments later, already puffed up like a rooster. "You can't just make decisions like that without talking to us," he said. "Us?" I repeated. "There is no us, there's me, and this is my house." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We'll see about that," he said. "You can't just kick your own daughter out." But he didn't know what I had already set in motion. That same afternoon, Mr. Harrison filed an official notice, giving them 30 days to vacate the property. The day the papers arrived, Amy was furious. She tore them open in front of me and shouted, "You're choosing a lawyer over your family." "No," I said softly. "I'm choosing myself over my abusers." For a moment, there was silence. Then she crumpled the papers and threw them at me. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll die alone." I stood my ground. Better alone than betrayed. That night, after they stormed out, the house was quiet, eerily so. But it wasn't emptiness I felt. It was peace. For the first time in 13 years, I could hear my own thoughts again. Still, I knew it wasn't over. Amy and Greg were furious, and people like them don't go quietly. They called me names. They spread rumors among family, saying I'd gone senile. One of Amy's friends even called to check on me, as if I were losing my mind. But every time the phone rang, every time someone doubted me, I felt stronger. Because I knew the truth. They had underestimated the wrong woman. 3 weeks later, I woke up to the sound of my doorbell. It was still early, just after sunrise. When I opened the door, Amy was standing there with Greg behind her, holding a half-empty coffee cup and wearing that same smug grin that used to make my stomach twist. "Mom," she began, her tone suddenly sweet. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "You have 1 week left before the notice expires. Talking won't change that." She gave a light laugh, the same one she used when she was a teenager trying to charm her way out of punishment. "Mom, we made mistakes, okay? But we're family. You don't have to do all this lawyer stuff. Just stop the eviction." "We'll figure things out like adults?" I asked. "Yes," she said quickly. I looked her dead in the eyes. "Then act like one." Greg stepped forward. Look, Brenda, let's not make this ugly. You're being manipulated by that lawyer of yours. We're just trying to. I raised my hand. No. What you're trying to do is regain control. But that ends today, he sneered. You're bluffing. I motioned toward the driveway. Then you might want to move your car before the sheriff gets here. They'll be here any minute. Amy's face drained of color. You actually went through with it. I did, I said. Because love doesn't mean being someone's doormat, it means knowing when to close the door. She started crying then. Loud, messy tears, the kind meant to stir guilt. But I didn't budge. For 17 years I had financed her excuses, her lies, her entitlement. I had given her everything except accountability that morning. I gave her that too. When the sheriff's car pulled into the driveway, Greg muttered something under his breath and stormed back inside to pack. Amy lingered on the porch, trembling. Grandma would be ashamed of you, she said finally. I took a deep breath. No, sweetheart. She'd be proud that I finally remembered the woman she raised me to be. The deputies stood quietly as Amy and Greg loaded the last of their things into the trunk. When the car finally pulled away, a strange stillness settled over the house. I sat on the porch steps, the morning sun warming my face. For the first time in 13 years, the air felt light. I made a cup of tea, just one cup, for me, and sat by the window where the ivy used to creep in. It was quiet, peaceful, real. That evening, I called Mr. Harrison to thank him. You didn't just help me with paperwork, I said. You helped me take my soul back. He chuckled softly. You did that yourself, Mrs. Vance. That night, I wrote a letter to Amy. I didn't send it, but I needed to say the words. My dear granddaughter, I loved you more than I loved myself. I spent years protecting you from the world, never realizing I needed to protect myself from you. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. If you ever decide to grow into the woman I hoped you'd become, my door will be open. But until then, I'm finally home. I sealed the letter and tucked it into the drawer beside my bed. Then I whispered a prayer. Not for her, but for me, that I never again mistake sacrifice for love or silence for peace. Because this time the silence was mine, and it was beautiful. It's been 6 months now. 6 months since the shouting stopped, since the house became mine again, not just in name, but in spirit. I thought I'd feel lonely. Instead, I feel light. Every morning I brew a single cup of coffee and sit by the same window where I used to watch Amy rush out the door without a word. Now, the light that filters through the curtains feels softer, almost forgiving. The silence that once hurt my ears has become my favorite kind of music. I've learned something about love. It's not proven by how much you give or how much pain you can endure in the name of family. Love is proven when you can walk away from what breaks you and still wish the other person peace. Some nights I think about Amy. I wonder if she's found her footing, if she ever realized how much of herself she lost chasing the illusion of independence while leaning on my sacrifices. I hope she's well, truly I do. But I no longer confuse hope with obligation. For too long I believed that being needed was the same as being loved. But it's not. Being needed drained me. Being loved would have healed me now. I love myself enough to fill the space that once felt empty. I planted roses in the yard, red ones, because my mother loved them. I take long walks in the evenings, sometimes waving to the neighbors who used to whisper about poor Brenda. But I'm not poor, not anymore. I'm rich in peace. Rich in freedom, rich in self-respect. And if you're listening to my story, if you're a mother or a grandmother, or anyone who's ever been made to feel like your love was a debt, then hear me clearly, you don't owe anyone the destruction of your soul. You can love them and still say no. You can forgive them and still close the door. You can pray for them and still protect your peace, because freedom isn't something they give you. It's something you take back the moment you remember who you are. I used to think I'd die surrounded by the same people I raised. Now, I know I'll live surrounded by something better. Peace, dignity, and the quiet joy of finally choosing me. And that, my dear, is the sweetest kind of love there is.